So I'm Laura Broxson and I'm from the National Animal Rights Association, and I'm here with a really good friend of mine and well-known activist, Nicole Matthews. So hi Nicole, thanks for joining me today.
Hi Laura, lovely to see you.
You too. So what I want to start off with is by asking you, what got you involved in animal rights and what was your vegan journey like?
Well, okay, so we're going back. So I guess this Yulin kind of marks, every year Yulin kind of marks my vegan anniversary as such. So this year I've kind of even lost count because it's hard to imagine a life before. So I don't even know, my 5 or 6 years this July, either or. But I mean, it's always been a kind of a stepping stone naturally to that point anyway. My dad always instilled in us when we were younger an association with the reality between, an animal and what was on your plate. So we were predominantly always veggie, aside from, the cultural kind of traditional, Christmas dinners, that kind of a thing. But it never really sat right with me. And I remember as a kid even not wanting the ham or, staying away from lamb because I knew what it was. So my dad would have brought us like to the Asian markets that were at the time in the 80s. I'm from Clondalkin in Dublin. They were down in and around Smithfields. And I remember it was like a warehouse nearly, for a catering setup. Huge big bags of tofu, like in a block.
Wow.
And he used to get them and, he'd make his own like falafel burgers and we'd go to the health store. So it was always something that, normal within our family dynamics, I guess. And so it always stuck with me. And, growing up, I wanted to be like a marine biologist or be a vet or, for a time even I studied equine science. So it was always in and around animals and animal rights and awareness and, a love of animals. And I guess really what sparked the trip from being vegetarian strictly for the animals, I mean, the added bonus is that it's so healthy and, the World Health Organization and so many different heart associations and everything, and they, acknowledge it, a plant-based diet, as being the best that there is out there for a long, healthy life. But that was just an added benefit. Predominantly for us as a family, it's always been animals first, and we just didn't want to ingest that. We didn't want, that toxicity, our karmic footprint for everything, for the planet, for our children's health, for our well-being. We just didn't want to partake in it. So I guess when I was pregnant, I remember one particular post, and it was to do with a dairy slaughterhouse. And that really struck a chord with me because I was coming up to giving birth to my third baby, with the intention again of breastfeeding, and to see, a mother cow go through what she was going through in a slaughterhouse and to have her fetus taken from her all for milk really struck a chord with me because I saw myself as no different.
Absolutely.
And I think when that snap happens and there is no division between the species and that veil is lifted, there's really no going back. So from then it was full steam ahead, and I gutted everything that was in the house, anything that was, tested on animals or associated with a company that was guilty of it. I just binned it. I remember wheeling the wheelie bin up to the back door and just chuck. It's like, we have to just, it's all or nothing now.
Yeah, brilliant.
So it was really, so Joshua is 6. So yeah, I guess this July would be 6 years.
Wow.
And so the kids, I kind of phased things out for the kids, and my husband then as well. So they'll be 5 years vegan, our 3 children and my husband this July. So over the year, I kind of, changed the norm for them because it's a little bit trickier sometimes with kids. They're used to the aesthetics of something,
Yeah,
and the
of course.
aesthetics of something means more to them even than the taste. Sometimes if they don't know what they're eating, or if you blitz up a load of veg and a pasta sauce, they don't know what's in it. It's just, it looks okay, so you dig in.
Yeah.
So, the usual kind of cheeses and butters and all of that kind of thing, and school lunches. So that just took a little bit of time to adapt. But I mean, once you get into the routine of the shopping choices, what goes into your shopping trolley, having a bit of a tweak, the new norm becomes the norm.
Absolutely. It's just kind of routine then. And,
Yeah.
after, going vegan and then with your family going vegan as well, what kind of got you involved in ICABS? And ICABS, for anyone who doesn't know, is the Irish Council Against Bloodsports. So was that kind of your first protest with them, or how did you happen to find them?
Actually, how I found them, believe it or not, we were all in the same town, like under each other's noses. And I didn't know. And obviously I knew of the bigger names in terms of PETA. I wasn't even aware of Irish groups at that stage. It was a personal mission, I suppose, of the heart for ourselves and within our own four walls, and to try and have that ripple effect into our bubble of, our family, our friends, and try to inspire other people by showing them how easy it was. So at that stage, I guess my youngest would have been maybe about a year-ish, and we already had a Facebook page, Kind Heart Conscious Planet, to inspire other people to make the same changes, really to show as a family dynamic how easy it is to make the shift, because people are often put off when small kids are in the equation. It's very easy for a couple or for an adult to say, this is what I'm going to do.
Of course.
And, it's completely different when there's children involved. But it was also quite easy to make those changes. And I just felt so impassioned, having seen the reality of a slaughterhouse, the reality of what the animals go through, the catastrophic, domino effect of what the planet has to go through in order to the logistical side of getting A to B. And so we already had the Facebook page, as I said, and we were trying to create a little bit of a domino effect and just to inspire other people. And I think there is, an association with, this shoving it down people's throat. You always hear this, like when it comes to veganism. But I think what it is there's just this snap of reality, and you're so driven to be like, it's nearly like, the oracle, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If people only knew what we've found out, it will inspire so much change. Oh my God, we don't have to live like this. So it drives you to be like, look at what can be done. It's so easy.
Yeah.
So that was kind of where we were coming from. But we were also very, we took baby steps with it, And there was, of course, a little bit of, in terms of the kids' birthday parties and things like that. It's like, oh, corn chicken nuggets, what are these? And, there was a little bit of fun poked from friends and family. So you do have to have a little bit of a bite your tongue.
Yeah.
Just get on with it. And before they knew it, it was the norm for them too, to come to our house. Christmas dinner was, an alternative. But as I said, the aesthetics looked identical. No different.
Absolutely.
And in fact, oftentimes tastier, doesn't leave you as bloated, So there was lots of pluses to it, and it has definitely inspired others around us, friends and family, to make the changes as well that wouldn't definitely necessarily have taken that path themselves. So, it's that ripple effect.
That's brilliant.
So how I came across the ICABS guys was, as I said, I grew up in Clondalkin, but I moved to Mullingar. And there was, at the time, I remember driving through Mullingar town, and the Belly Wrens circus was in Mullingar, and there's like a big green in the center with like a roundabout. Mullingar is just a series of roundabouts, but one of the roundabouts had 3 grown elephants on it. No barriers. The kids from the town were running around them. The elephants had been walked through the town like a one-way system and back up as walking billboards for this particular circus. And I remember I had my eldest 2 in the car with me. Joshua, my baby, was at home with Ray at the time, my husband, and Daisy and Ashton were so upset by it. And to see the difference of the reaction to the children that just saw Dumbo was in town, as opposed to, a little bit more of a spark of an awareness as to what these animals get through to be here, where they should be, environmentally, that it was just so unnatural for them. And I guess I was inspired by my kids saying to me, please do something.
I remember you took a video. You took a video, and I think that's how I first met you, because your video went fairly viral. And I was like, oh, who's this activist? I don't know. Like, what's going on here? So I remember it was a big thing at the time, you sharing that video.
Yeah, I got so many messages from all over the world, like people from Dubai, from New Zealand, from Canada, that reached out, you know, after I shared it on Facebook, and everybody else kind of shared it. Before I knew it was on YouTube, and then our own Facebook page, the kind of Conscious Planet one, was being shared as well. And I was just getting, there's still messages that I haven't gotten to, you know, all these years later. It was, and it kind of gave my heart a lift that I wasn't alone in seeing the world how we saw it and how different it could be. And there was so much support. I put up a post with the photographs, and there was bull hooks being used on these elephants. And one of them in particular was rocking, and it was that rock that zoo animals have, you know, that hysteria inside them, that frustration, and her eyes were just so, she was just so shut down. And my two children, the eldest actually, Daisy, she couldn't get out of the car. She just said, I don't want to see, I don't want to see. So I locked up the car and I left her, you know, where I could see her, but she was safe, because I was very aware of, at any stage, these animals can turn and bolt. And there was nothing to secure. There was no fence to put them off. There was nothing. There was moving traffic all around them. The kids, I mean, you know, the posts are still there. I suppose if you Google my name and Google belly wrens or the elephants or something, it'll come up. But that really struck me. So there was the safety aspect of it, the cruelty side to it, the lack of awareness from the authorities in the area that nothing was being done to stop these people, that they just had free rein to do whatever they wanted. That really galled me as well, you know, because we rely on the authorities as well to keep us safe. And the fact that these people were given priority to walk these huge animals, you know, that could have flipped a car or endangered a, you know, trampled a child, and it was all just money. And the siren was going, or the music background on the trucks, and they were advertising the circus and where they were going to be in Mullingar and for how many nights, and it was just all so artificial and wrong and fake, you know. And so my little boy Ashton, he was like, Mommy, please do something. We have to do something. They shouldn't be here. You know, they should be in Africa or in India. They're not meant to be here. Please do something. So I'm sitting in the car going, how am I going to do something that's going to, you know, inspire change, make them think there's a different way of life, you know, just to kind of get the ball rolling. So I was just, it was like a calling, I guess. I got out of the car. I kept Ashton at a safe distance, and I told him if anything happened, you turn and you run to the car. And I just went up and I took the pictures, and I guess I was there in the right time, and, you know, the right place, right time. And one of the elephants bucked forward, and it was like the revving of a car. And at that stage, one of the guys, the handlers, the whole time he was standing behind, and you can see it clearly in the photographs, and he was looking at his mobile phone, scrolling the whole time, not even keeping an eye on the crowd. There was just no responsibility whatsoever. And I remember looking into the eyes of that elephant, and I just made a pact. I was like, I see you, you matter, and I'm going to do everything that I can so that this isn't acceptable, you know, and that this stops. So the pictures just kind of, as I said, right place, right time. They turned the elephants after the third kind of book. This guy came over and he had the fancy coat on, you know, like ringmaster style, and like a little top hat kind of vibe. And he came over and spun the elephants around. But he slapped the one that booked forward like 3 times with an open hand on the side of her face.
Oh my gosh.
And I just thought, oh, you know, I cursed under my breath, and I was just like, oh man, no, this has to stop. So they turned the elephants and they walked them back again from the roundabout where they had parked up, we say at the side of Penny's at the top of Mullingar. So they had to come from the green area through moving traffic to load them onto the lorry again. And I stood at the back, and all the kids were, you know, yipping and laughing. And
yeah, like it was a positive thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was just such a horrible, just a disrespect for the majestic, you know, endangered species that these were, that we couldn't afford them protection, that we were still using them. It was never enough. So I remember seeing her climb, and there was this tiny little step just on the back of, you know, a normal lorry that she had to get up onto to get in. And she was so clumsy, and her girth was the width of the truck. It was just so wrong. So I got a couple of clips of them using the bull hooks, which are illegal. And as I said, the slap on the face, and it was just so wrong. So I put up a post, but it was in terms of being a mother in this world, and, you know, how wrong it was and how it really struck a chord with me. And I approached the guy that was running the show. And I said to him, you know, it's really wrong that these animals are used and abused for a circus, for something as pathetic as a circus. And I said, it's great that you do what you do in terms of, you know, how talented people can be. Acrobats, jugglers, you know, fire eaters, the motorbike riders, whatever it is, you know, inside the loop of the cage. And I said, you would come to your circus and we would support you when it's people only, not when it's animals. I said, because this isn't good for them. And in broken English, he turned and he said to me, no, but it is good for me. And that just sparked such a fire in my belly. And it was the beginning of, you know, another kind of fuel behind the campaigns that were already existing here in the country, like yourselves with NARA, already with the Irish Council Against Bloodsports. At the time, ARAN were really prevalent, AFAR as well with Bernie Wright, and there was so much that I actually wasn't aware of, because I wasn't yet moving in those circles, but I just instinctively knew it was wrong, and I was inspired to try and stop it for my children's sake and for the animals' sake. And the post just took off, and before I knew it, I was planning a protest on the back of that, and the support that we got from people in town outside of the circus where it was being held in Mullingar. So many came along, and that's where I met the crew with ICABs.
Wow.
They came along, and I remember Aidan in particular, you know, and she was saying to me, it's so great, so many people came, and that's how we kind of, you know, made an affinity with each other. And it was very much so a feeling of, you're who I've been looking for since forever, you know. So
wow, that's quite an introduction to activism. I mean, you know, you didn't even need to necessarily see a protest or even hear of the groups to be able to be inspired to take action, and, you know, to have your kids kind of be the inspiration for that. Like, that's an amazing story to have. And I know that, like, ever since then, you've been hugely involved in a lot of ICABS campaigns. So what's the main goals for ICABS and yourself at the moment? I know you do a lot of work with Greyhound racing. Hare coursing is now on the agenda again. What are you kind of doing at the moment with ICABS?
Well, obviously, because of the whole COVID-19 situation, you know, and the lockdown, we can't have, like yourselves as well, we can't have protests, you know, really. So we've been very much so on pause right now. But the beauty of social media is that, you know, the world can still turn even though everybody is on standby. And thankfully, because wouldn't we all have completely lost our mind without that kind of an interaction, you know?
Yeah.
So always, no matter what's going on in the country in terms of legislation changes and inspiring change, we always have a rundown on our Facebook page in particular, but obviously on Twitter and on Instagram as well. So all the TDs that are associated with whatever the topic may be at the time, whether it's, you know, the ferry's been called into question because of puppies being transported, because, you know, that's another horrific side to Ireland's bad karmic stamp, is that we're number one in the puppy breeding, you know, in terms of, certainly in Europe. And the cruelty aspects that are associated with that. And, you know, so public awareness is huge still. And we need, in terms of every campaign, really, it's the public that get behind us, that are inspired, as I was, you know, to not just say, well, what can I do? Or my voice is irrelevant, or what changes can I make? You know, that one drop is the drop that all collects, you know. And so we very much so hope that, you know, the public follow the pages. Ban Bloodsports is our Irish Council Against Bloodsports Facebook page, and you can find us on Instagram. And so we always have the contact details for every TD, every councillor, and our party group as well, you know, depending on how, as a whole, through the party whip that they vote, or that they're even an individual within a party, oftentimes they will approach us to say, I really want to see this ban come in as well, whether it be the fox hunt and the hare coursing, or, you know, whatever it is. Even over the years, the stag hunt, and that still, even though the legislation is there, we're very aware that it still happens, you know, in pockets.
Yeah.
Very small percentages of the population, but still they are quite active in the small pockets. So, you know, we're very aware of that as well too. So legislation is great, but it has to be enforced. You know, we could have all legislation changed in the morning, but if we don't have the backing behind it, and for the public to be aware, to be vigilant, to contact the authorities if they see, you know, rabbit lamping or a hare trapping happening, or larcen traps or whatever it is on their land or nearby in their communities, to speak up. And, you know, when election time comes, or even the clinics, the TDs and the councillors' clinics that are in their own small towns or communities, approach these people. You know, there's definitely an air of authority, and it's not just an Irish thing. I think it just goes across the board, where people are afraid to speak up because somebody has a title, or, you know.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
You know, so we would most certainly inspire people and remind people that those people are in those positions because we have voted them there, and they're only there as long as they're catering to the public wants and the public needs and listening. You know, they have to listen.
Absolutely.
So the more people that speak up, the more people that inspire change.
And even with kind of what happened with the circus protest you had in Mullingar, I mean, the kind of conclusion was that we did get a legislative ban on wild animals and circuses. So it can happen, and it can start from, you know, one person like yourself acknowledging that it's wrong, doing something about it, and protests and, you know, action alerts and letters to TDs and things can conclude to it being abolished. So at the moment, we have that chance again with hare coursing. How do you feel about it? Do you think it's going to be a success this time? Because I know it's been tried a couple of times before. Do you think Ireland's ready this time to say no to hare coursing?
Well, I think we were always ready. And in terms of, you know, the population of Ireland as a whole, aside from, as I said, that very small population that are active in this, and, you know, it's often, when we talk about the Irish hare is as it is in its DNA and in its makeup since the Ice Age. It hasn't changed, but it is an endangered species, and it is native to Ireland. And we have a responsibility, you know, as this generation, to protect it. And as well, then, you know, there's the disease that's been so rampant through the hare coursing and the rabbit population as well. And, you know, it's just, there comes a point where just because it's the way it's always been, there comes a point where that just doesn't float anymore. And change has to happen. You know, there's so many things in humanity's past that it reached a cross in the road where somebody stood up and said, you know, we need to change. And it's not enough to say that it's the way it's always been, or sure, we can't change it, or sure, what's the point, or, you know, that's what they're there for. Hares most certainly aren't there to be netted, to be trapped, to be kept in a box away from their own ecosystems, you know, and stressed to the max, put on a field. And I mean, when you look at what hare coursing is, the whole point of it is to bet on it, to roar and shout at these animals on a field, and to turn its direction. Like, how sad. That's it. That's what it's all about. And the amount of stress that one little creature has to go through in order for that to happen, and then, you know, be released wherever or kept for breeding, or, you know, we see the other side of the greyhound industry then as well, where they are blooded. And oftentimes it's people within the communities themselves, you know, it could be the niece or nephew of the uncles that have been doing it and the granddads that have been doing it, or the children themselves that have grown up and now see it for what it is. And they reach out to us and they give us the inside information. We know where these places are. We know what these people are doing. You know, we've seen the footage, and, you know, whether it's piglets or rabbits or kittens, you know, the whole thing of animals being given free to good homes has to stop, on the likes of Dundee and everything. And again, it boils down to public awareness. You know, we need to approach those kinds of platforms and social media to appeal for a ban so that animals can't be, you know, just given like that, you know, that they're protected as well. So in terms of, you know, the hare coursing ban, it's always something that's a possibility and that's supported. Yeah. And if you talk to the average Joe on the road, absolutely they'll say to you, yeah, you know, it's a no-brainer, definitely. We'd like to see the ban. But what's happened oftentimes is, if we've approached the ban a couple of years ago, the brilliant TD Maureen O'Sullivan, who's a patron as well for ICABS, and she's been phenomenal in her support over the years, and you know, we're so indebted to her. And we were invited in with her into the Dáil, and she put the ban before the floor, but at the time it was overlooked because and overshadowed because of the whole abortion referendum was coming up. So oftentimes, you know, it's given priority. Animal rights is seen as not so important over other things, and that's where, you know, we've lost out at times because of that. So it's not that the support isn't there or that it's not a possibility. It's just sometimes it's plain old bad luck, you know, that it's not come to the forefront and fallen on the floor at the right time within the Dáil. And, you know, we do have a huge population of our TDs that are involved in these industries.
Yeah, that's another big factor. So there's huge conflict of interest there, isn't there?
Massive. So we're always on the back foot, you know, and I think really when we will really see a huge change right throughout the world when it comes to animal rights and animal welfare is when that generation is no more and there's fresh blood and fresh eyes and fresh hearts in those buildings to make decisions that are so overdue, and, you know, just ethically it's all that makes sense anymore, you know, in a world now that's so PC and that's, you know, predominantly led with the good intentions of kindness. It just makes no sense anymore, you know, to use and abuse animals either for profit,
absolutely,
for gambling, you know, like it's time for change. So we do hope. Now the other thing is right now, you know, the whole government reshuffle here in Ireland, so that will be given, you know, priority as well. So we hope that our campaigns aren't lost in that too, you know. So it's all about awareness really, and as I said, you know, the public backing.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, the hare coursing bill has a great chance of success this time, and it will all depend on, you know, the groups like ICABS and ourselves and everything, you know, working really hard to get that public awareness out there, getting the pressure on TDs, the protests and everything. So I'm very hopeful. And what I also think is that if we ban hare coursing this year and next year, I feel that we have a much greater chance than of banning greyhound racing and banning fox hunting. I feel like it's like a window in. What do you think would be the next step after hare coursing? Would it be fox hunting? Would it be greyhound racing, or could both be banned?
Well, I mean, the Irish Kennel Club and the IGB, you know, they like to separate themselves, but really there's a lot of overspill. And in terms of the overbreeding and the use of greyhounds for both, definitely it will have a domino effect. And we would hope that it would, you know, for the better, through supply and demand, it would affect the overbreeding, which is a colossal, you know, side effect, we'll say, of the industries. And that really is lumped on the Irish rescues. You know, when those dogs are no longer wanted, when they don't run fast enough, you know, a term that's used within these industries is if the dogs are keen enough. So, you know, either they have or haven't been blooded, or they just in themselves, they just don't have it. They're just not bothered. They don't want to chase, or, you know, they're deemed not fast enough, or their lineage isn't worthy to breed from. So the dogs will be discarded. And we saw, you know, with the RTE piece, the RTE Investigates, the greyhounds running for their lives, you know, just how huge the killing rate is. Just, I mean, it just beggars. When 16.8 million of the Irish budget can be given, you know, it pays these industries still to breed these dogs, knowing that this is where they're going to go. It's a scrap heap, you know. And we would just hope that, you know, that the Irish public continue not to associate themselves either with online gambling, or when the tracks do reopen, you know, not to attend, to be vigilant about the schools being used as well. You know, as a mother, I'm very much so, I don't want my child associated with gambling. We know what happens in later life, you know, when gambling, you know, becomes an addiction and people lose their houses, families break apart, you know, and I certainly don't want my children thinking that's the norm.
Yeah.
Or, you know, that it's all Sunday roasts and cheap pints, and, you know, it's just wrong. And so for communities as well, to be vigilant that their schools not be used as promotion for these events.
Yeah, I find that shocking that at a lot of the Greyhound stadiums, I often see people bringing kids in, and that's always very, very shocking to me.
Yeah, I mean, even stag parties, like, can we just think outside the box, please? You know, everybody has a responsibility, really. Like, can we just go somewhere else? Because the truth is, you know, these dogs are so worthy of so much better. You know, we've 2 Hounds ourselves here at home, and Legend, our amputee warrior, you know, he's a survivor of the dog meat trade in China. And oftentimes, you know, when it comes to rescue as well, people are nervous to rescue a dog, especially if it's had a traumatic past, because they think that the dogs will be unpredictable or maybe aggressive. And, you know, I can, hand on heart, I can vouch that, you know, our boy has certainly come from the worst of what humanity can inflict upon any species. And, you know, he saw dogs slaughtered in front of him for human consumption, and he was still willing to trust and to love. And he doesn't have a bad bone in his body. He's such a love bug. And it's nearly like, because his past was so traumatic, his future, he's so determined to just fill it with happiness and excited, you know, just, he just wants to greet everybody and, you know, soak up all the belly rubs and the ear rubs. And it's true of so many within rescue. Oftentimes the worse the situation that they've come from, the bigger love bugs they are.
Yeah.
Because they're so grateful. They understand that they've been saved. They understand that they've been rescued. And all of these greyhounds and lurchers, because of the crossbreeding and the overbreeding, you know, lurchers go hand in hand, certainly here in Ireland. And, you know, we've such a bad rap for that. Because our government let down these dogs so badly, and the industries are so fueled on continuing to overbreed them, as I said, because of the 16.8 million, and then they can go on for further subsidies as well for breeding separately, you know. So
and it's
just
taxpayers' money, you know. It's money that you and I did not volunteer to go there, so it just shouldn't happen.
And especially when we see, you know, national schools losing teachers, losing transport for the kids because the funding isn't there, the medical background, people waiting for, you know, for hospital beds. And it's just, the system is so warped, and it's so piled up in the wrong direction, you know. And so we'd certainly hope to see the bans come in. I mean, we've just seen as well, China has brought in legislation to ban the consumption and the buying or selling of dog meat, you know, for human consumption. And that is certainly a legislation that I never thought I'd see in my day. So, I mean, if China can do it, you know, when they have no animal rights legislations, anything that's on Chinese soil it's open for animal testing by law. And still they can say that that's wrong, you know. So, I mean, it would only give us hope. It was definitely, when the legislation came in and we all found out about it, it was, you read it again and again going, what? Is this for real? Because it was such a high hope to see that happen. And I suppose as well, because in terms of the wet markets and the coronavirus and the overspill of species, and the eye was really on China to do something. But the eye is also really on Ireland to do something.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, I mean, people are disgusted by the rate of animal cruelty, whether it's the horses, you know, or the greyhounds or the hares or the foxes. You know, already other countries have banned hare coursing. Greyhound
Exactly.
racing.
We're one of the last, you
Honestly,
know.
yeah. And we really need to pick up speed on that, you know. And we were one of the last to ban the circuses as well. Now the fur farming, you know, is another thing that's
Yeah,
coming to an
all these
end.
things took a very, very long time compared to other countries.
Yeah,
And I don't know why certain TDs are so reluctant for this kind of more progressive, compassionate legislation to be brought forward, because we are one of the last.
yeah.
And it's shocking.
Well, I think really, you know, in all truth, what it boils down to is keeping the bums in the doll.
Yeah.
And they're keeping those industries afloat, because without that budgetary subsidy from the Ireland's taxpayers' money every year on an annual basis, 16.8 million. I mean, you know, for $250 million since 2001 to be given. Can you imagine what that would have done to the education, to the background?
Absolutely.
Incredible people and talent that we've lost, you know, by the courses not being here in our universities that have gone overseas. We've lost all of that, you know, and it really needs to be put back into the right places instead of pillaged and wasted, because these industries are bankrupt. Without that, they're bankrupt. That's what's keeping them afloat. It's just, it's so corrupt, you know, and so wrong. So definitely, certainly within the rural communities as well. And I'm in a rural community, and it's oftentimes it's said, I have to say, the TDs from rural communities say, well, this is how it is where I am, and people in a town or a city situation don't understand. That's not the case, because I'm in a rural situation too, and the majority of people around me don't want any part of it. They recognize it for what it is. But, you know, there's you know, they often say as well that it's keeping people employed, and there's other things we can do. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
That excuse doesn't float anymore either, you know. Like,
No, it doesn't.
A different record. You know.
Absolutely. And you know, if they have 16.8 million to be putting into keeping the Greyhound racing industry afloat, surely they could divert some of that into job training alternatives for people, if it is
Absolutely.
genuinely their job, you know, put it into retraining programs.
Or help the rescue side of things that these industries have caused. Help the dogs, give back to the dogs, you know, give back to the hares, to support the ecosystems and to protect them. Those jobs are still necessary, but they just need to be tweaked. You know what I mean? And tweaked for the better, and with the animals in mind instead of the pockets in mind. And definitely when it comes down to those industries being kept afloat, the TDs will vote to keep these in because they're keeping their own electorate communities happy. They won't be voted in if they go against it, and then they lose their seat. And it all comes down to that at the end of the day. So they'll continue to support, to turn up at the tracks for the photo op, you know, and then disappear 10 minutes later and it's job done. So it keeps everybody happy. And, you know, we just need to inspire change. You know, it's time. It's time.
It is. It's 2020. It's definitely time for change.
So in terms of the COVID situation and, you know, the overspill where people of minority communities have been so badly, you know, disenfranchised intentionally and kept on the back burner in terms of not being able to progress in society, minimum wage, you know, the support there not to learn a different language if they come from overseas. And we're seeing that the COVID, the infection rates are so high, and the death rates as well within people that work in slaughterhouses or meatpacking factories as well. So there's that other element. And oftentimes we hear within animal rights, you know, people that would be against it are kind of not so eager to go change, because as a human race, we don't like when we're forced to, you know, to give an explanation as to how we live.
Yeah, we don't like looking inwards on ourselves.
Exactly. But we don't like change. We're very much so creatures of habits. You know, we like to stick to the norm or how it's always been. So in terms of, you know, the argument against, well, you can't, why are you wasting your time talking about animal rights? Animal rights aren't important. Look at what's happening for humans right now. My argument is always, animal rights are human rights and human rights are animal rights. And you can't separate the two. And I think when you look even in terms of animal rights and animal welfare, there should be no grey area. And I think that's where we come up, you know, against a lot of unnecessary challenges because, or lack of support even, because people will be dismissive. But it just goes to show right now, you know, the people that have really, they see themselves as having no other option but to work in these plants or meat packing factories and slaughterhouses that come in from overseas, you know, whether it's Eastern European or, you know, we saw as well the whole strawberry situation, you know, where people are brought in because the population here in Ireland, we see those positions as less than what we deserve. You know, we're too good for them. So someone's going to have to do it, you know, so these companies are up against a wall. So what do? They have to bring it from overseas and, you know, they're left with no option that way. But that's where we would come from, and it never before has it been so highlighted, you know, that you can't separate the two. Animal rights are human rights and human rights are animal rights. And I just think it's very easy for people to dismiss it, you know, or like being up against different legislation or debates that are on the table or questions at the time that jar in terms of the Dáil or the Oireachtas or, you know, whatever topics are on the agenda at the time. We really can't afford to overlook the most innocent amongst our global, you know, communities, which are animals. They don't have a choice. And if we can't afford them the protection, we're never going to get ahead for each other and for ourselves. It's just not going to happen. Absolutely. So what should be, you know, instead of it being an exception to the rule, it should be a seal deal before it even begins, that they are afforded protection and that they're seen for the vital, you know, individuals that they are and how they affect, you know, the ecosystems and the planet, because every creature from the biggest to the smallest has a vital role on this planet.
Absolutely.
Human beings, not so much. Not so much. All we do is, you know, we don't bring great things to the party.
No, we exploit, you know, that's all.
We exploit, and, you know, and it's happened for generations, and since the whole industrialization of the agricultural sector throughout the planet, the fisheries, you know, the deforestation, we're at this point now because of, you know, the domino effect from years, and it's landed us here. So going forward, we have a responsibility, but it definitely starts instead of the top down from capitalism and, you know, from these huge organizations that only spin for profit, from them making the decision. We need to make the decision from the bottom up, you know, and to
absolutely.
And in doing that, we protect the disenfranchised, we protect the minorities, we protect the ones that are, you know, kept out of the loop of societies, you know, whether it be for voting reasons or, you know, they're not acknowledged, you know. And just as every species has a role, every ethnic background has a role as well and a voice, and we all need to be listened to on an even platform, or else we're never going to get anywhere.
Very well said. Absolutely. Agree 100%. And for anyone who wanted to get involved in ICABs or donate to ICABs, like I know there's, you guys have done big billboard campaigns, which was great. So for anyone who wants to donate or get involved, what's the best way to do so?
All the links are on our Facebook pages. And for anybody, you know, that does want to get involved, as I said, we're kind of on a standstill right now because of the circumstances with lockdown still. But please share and inspire change within your own friend list, you know, on social media, and you never know what minds you might change. And that's how, you know, the ripple effect starts. It's like the butterfly effect, you know, and we just need to keep pushing forward for that. And in terms of, you know, the public opinion, with the Irish Council Against Bloodsports, we funded a Red Sea poll, and it was overwhelming, you know, in terms of the public opinion. You know,
yeah, it was great result, 77% against Hare.
Yeah, and they agree that hunting, fox hunting and hare coursing, 77% of the Irish population agree that it needs to be banned, you know. And so that speaks volumes in and of itself.
It does. That's an amazing result, and the TDs need to listen that this is what people want. It's what people wanted for last time, so they better do it this time.
And that's even throughout the country. That's not just in a town or city, you know. It's spread out entirely, evenly throughout the country. So these rural communities are still voting for that too, because the other side of this is, you know, the hunts coming on private land, farmers being threatened.
Yeah.
And, really aggressive behavior, because these people they just have free reign. The authorities are on their side because there's a lot of cross wires, and it's just so wrong,
Absolutely, but the time for change is now. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before I let you go? Any message you'd like to give, even for anyone thinking of going vegan?
Well, in terms of, we've never had more of an awakening than what's going on right throughout the world right now. And whether you want to put on your tinfoil hat and say that it was man-made, or, if you see it for what it is, and it's not just China's problem. And it's not just, places within Africa, their problem in terms of eating dog meat, or, because Brazil has a population that does too. There's places in Switzerland and throughout Europe. A ban had to come in America because it was prevalent there too. But in terms of wet markets as such, there's religious groups even in New York, and they slit chickens' necks and they spin them over their heads, and, within certain communities, and it's like, it's a way of, in their eyes, of offering to the spirits to cleanse them of sin. I mean, wet markets exist all over the world, and every slaughterhouse is a wet market.
Absolutely.
I think only when, you and I and those of us involved in animal welfare and in animal rights, we know the reality that happens behind those closed doors. And, there is definitely still a disconnect. And there's as I said, there's been never in our history has there been such a shutdown, a lid put on the whole planet on lockdown, to slam on the brakes and to call ourselves into question. It's a time for a personal evolution as well. And once we ourselves, within our own four walls and within our own families, decide to make those changes to inspire a kinder world, we in turn affect supply and demand. Just look now, walking through the shops, even 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when we first went vegan, we had to search. We had to search for ingredients if we were making the kids' birthday cakes ourselves, or, different things in the health stores or online even, for different alternatives to Christmas dinners, or, whatever it was. But now, everywhere.
Yeah, everything's so accessible. Yeah.
It's never been so easy. So really there is no excuse, and, being a mother as well, I have to say, I've had days where it's caught up on me, and it's really broken my heart that it's taken this for us to really, look at ourselves and question ourselves. And I still think, the majority of people are very willing to just hop back on right where they left off and continue as they were living beforehand. And it's just not good enough. I think everybody now has a responsibility to be a team player for the greater good. I've certainly been nervous about what the future holds for my children. And I feel like nearly let down by the lack of mankind. The kind is missing, and it's taken, we kind of thought that it would be, a climate catastrophe, global warming and the waters, the sea levels rising and that kind of thing, that would create a decision that would kind of take it out of our hands, that we either had to, because for tax reasons, for like a global footprint, a CO2 footprint, in terms of countries, individual countries, and how they could claim back tax relief, if they put in wind farms or solar panels on roofs and that kind of thing. There would be some kind of an incentive to, a push for change. So I did kind of think that this fork in the road would come, but I definitely thought it would come in terms of climate reasons.
Me too. I don't think anyone was expecting this to happen, but I think like there is no going back to normal, whatever that was anyway. I think everyone has to take from this that changes need to be made,
Absolutely. And it's not just down to China to make those changes.
Absolutely.
It's down to all of us as individuals, and to inspire our children to think outside the box and to live, different from the cultures and traditions, and break outside of those restraints. because, you know, I don't know what's left, what's coming after this if we don't take this opportunity now to change.
I agree. I think it's not going to stop until people do something. And I think, you know, at the moment we're seeing a load of big movements for social justice, whether it's campaigns for animal rights, campaigns against racism, sexism, homophobia. There's a big uprising for change at the moment, and I think we need to take it and run with it, you know.
Absolutely. There's a huge conscious shift, but at the same time, you know, we can only do that if we as individuals sign up to that, you know. And like back in the day, with, you know, looking into those eyes of that elephant, and, you know, making a pact and promising to do change and not to give up, you know. And if we do that, well then, you know, we're here to stay. But if we don't, well then, you know, Mother Nature has a way of resetting. And if we're gone, this planet will thrive. Like, you know, it'll just continue to spin and be all the better for us. So, you know, I very much so believe that we don't inherit this planet from our ancestors, that we borrow it from our children. And we really have a responsibility. And even if we don't have children ourselves, you know, just to care enough to give the next generation something better than what we picked up.
Yeah, well said. Very, very well said. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for chatting with me today. It's been very insightful, and I hope to see you soon, and hope to see you at a successful celebration party that we banned hair coursing soon as well, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's definitely ours for the taking, because only a few years ago we would never have thought that the circuses would have been banned with wild animals. We would never have thought that the fur farming would have been shut down, you know, because again, it was in, you know, rural communities, and it was kind of out of the hands and deemed, you know, belonged to a particular group of TDs for that reason. And, you know, public outcry has inspired change too. So
absolutely, change is coming.
Yeah, so please keep in touch, you know, and for everybody, just keep an eye on Ban Bloodsports. And if there's any information out there as well, you can always send either myself through our Kind Heart Conscious Planet Facebook page. You can send us information in terms of, you know, inside info, and, you know, we always treat it with the greatest of respect, and everything is confidential, and, you know, we can promise you that, because it's been vital, really, you know, to push forward campaigns and change, you know. And so really, on the whole, it's not to be afraid, you know, that no change came with whispers, that we need to be, you know, united together to inspire change and a kinder world for us all, really, you know, and it's possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very well said. Thanks so much, Nicole.
Lots of love. See you soon.